Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this week's Tips and Tricks webinar. Today's topic is on geoprotection. As you can see, we thought it was a pretty timely topic, so hope you get a lot out of this one. As always, use the Q&A chat. You have any questions during the webinar, and we'll make sure we answer those. Our presenter today is an SC from New Jersey, Brian McElhair. Brian, take it away.
Thanks, Rob, and good morning, and thank you for joining today's Tips and Tricks session. As Rob mentioned, my name is Brian McElhair. I'm one of the regional checkpoint SCs that cover the central and southern portion of New Jersey. Today, we're going to talk about geoprotection, and I hope to answer the two main questions is, what is geoprotection, and why do we need this? As you know, in all the recent news that you hear, that there's global cyber attacks, ransomware attacks coming from all different areas around the world. Many of you may are looking for a means of stopping those potential attacks through a geographical type of tool. That's what we're going to talk about today is geoprotection. I'm going to talk about a couple of the checkpoint tools that you can use and leverage to block off the country's IP address ranges. So before we start, I just want to point out that the countries I've used in this presentation are for demonstrational purposes only and not intended to offend anyone's nationality or show malice towards any country. Again, they're only country codes. We have to do a block or allow to demonstrate the tool itself. So again, I jump all around to different countries. So what is geoprotection? It's the ability of leveraging a dynamic object that represents a grouping of IP addresses that have been allocated to that country. And the benefit of that is that you as an administrator do not need to know all those IP addresses. All that information and all that legwork is done for you. All you have to do is just click on the object, and then you have the ability to block or allow those IP address ranges. Those IP address ranges have been put into a database, and we're going to talk about where that database comes from later in the presentation. And the benefit of that is that you can create these access policies, and in some tools you can get very granular with the country codes and the services in which you can block. The need for this, as we opened up, you're hearing all these type of cyber attacks. Some of them are coming from certain countries. And how do I prevent that from even entering into my corporate network infrastructure? So that's why we need these type of protection. They're very quick, they're fast, and they are all encompassing for those countries. It also limits access to specific services as well. We can get that granularization. You can limit certain countries for specific services. So you don't have to just block all the IP addresses, but we can get down granular where you can be selective on the services in which they do have access to. Another feature of the geoprotection is the identifying in your logs where your workflows or your traffic is actually going to, either outbound or inbound. Where's the traffic coming from? Very quick, you can look in your logs, you can see the geographical country codes flags on there. I can see that, hey, I got traffic coming from Ireland, I got stuff that's going out to Jamaica. Very quick. I don't have to look in the logs and see an IP address and do the research myself. Some of the challenges that you may face when using these tools is if you're an international company, you may accidentally block, potential customers. If you have websites, if it's a shopping site or something like that, you may prevent people from those areas from being able to access your websites. That's a big challenge, trying to make sure that you don't prevent that. Also, how do I limit those access? And that's what I'm going to demonstrate in this presentation on how you can selective use services and country codes together. The one thing that I found out was kind of interesting is you may not be thinking about this, but you have your employees, they may go out on vacation, and they may go on vacation to places all around the globe. If they have their laptop with them, you may be blocking them access to their VPN. So some of the challenges that you may face when using these tools, but again, with the tools I'm going to show, you can customize some of these tools to allow these services to work, even though you're blocking other services from those countries. As I pointed out before, we do have two main tools for geoprotection. That's GeoPolicy. This does require an IPS license to activate. The other option is updatable objects. Now, updatable objects is more than just geolocation pieces, and we're going to talk more about that later in the presentation. But this is the newer way, and it gives you a lot more flexibility within your policy itself as far as restrictions. The last piece is an outbound protection only. The reason why I added this was one of my customers actually was using the GeoPolicy and updatable objects within their perimeter firewall, but they noticed that some of their employees were still able to get out to sites that were destined with a URL of that country code. And we're going to talk more about that, but that's the reason why I added this in as a full geoprotection portfolio. So let's talk about GeoPolicy. GeoPolicy has been around for a while. It's part of the ThreatBlade environment. It came out, I know it was definitely in R77.X, but basically what it's doing is assigning IP addresses to a country. And that is built on a MaxMind database. This is an independent company that maintains that database of IP addresses to country codes. And we leverage that within our Checkpoint environment. Those databases are updated on a routine basis, and you can use those country codes within your policies. I do want to point out that if you have not used GeoPolicy before, if you have a fresh install using R81, GeoPolicy is hidden from the navigation plane. In the troubleshooting session at the end of this presentation, I will show you the commands that are needed if you would like to turn this on, where you can enable it again through the command line. So what is GeoPolicy? These are the options. It's a very simple way to block IP addresses, either source or destination, via their IP addresses that are assigned to that country. So very easy. I have an activation mode, whether it's active or monitor only, kind of like in the detect mode. You can select a listing of countries. You can determine and select the direction in which you want. You can either do a to or from or both, and the action is accept or drop, and then we have the tracking method as well. This is the top end. This is where you become very specific. Any country that is not defined in the top section is part of the policy for all other countries. And again, you have the same type of thing, except you do not select any country in here. It's all the countries outside of the ones that you have defined in the top portion of the policy. And then you can have the accept or drop or lock. Now, I always look at this as whatever is your shorter list. If you're only dropping a small number of countries, then that would be your top piece. You would put in, say you have a handful of countries that you want to drop, you would put, the top portion would be drop. And then for all other countries, you would do as accept. Now, if you're blocking a lot of countries, then you would change it around. Top portion I would set up as accept, and then on the bottom as drop. Just makes it easier for administration. Here is a sample policy. As you can see, it's part of the shared policies, GeoPolicy here. You select on your policy. This is where you can select your different countries and the action and the track, and then the direction that you have. You can create multiple custom policies as well. It's not one policy fits all. You can create different policies, and there is a gateway selection here that you can have different geo policies assigned to different gateways. On the bottom here, this is what I was talking about, the policy of other countries. Here I have the top end that I'm dropping, and then any country that's not listed here is in the accept. All right, you do have exceptions to this. As you can see, we do have exceptions. This is where the limitation to geo policy comes into play. We don't have the ability to leverage the same country codes as part of your exceptions. You can only create host objects here, which is stuff that you know. So in this case, if I was blocking an area that had like to say Bermuda, and I want to have just one host in there, I would have to know that IP address and allow access to it. So this is kind of limited. And the next tool that I'm going to show, you can see how that becomes obsolete. Like you can do a lot more granular type of access and denials. But the benefit here with the geo policy is it's done before the access policy is touched. And you look at my geo policy logs right here, you can see that some of them don't have the rule number listed here. And that's because they're being dropped or accepted via the geo policy. So let's click on the top one here, which is Singapore. You click on there and you can see that it was stopped by the geo protection. Source country was Singapore, and it was in a drop state. And that was based on, in my geo policy, I did have Singapore as a country that I was dropping. The next one I'm going to click on is from Great Britain. This IP address is accepted. It doesn't have an access rule number here. It's accepted. If we click on that again, it tells me that it was allowed based upon the geo protection. So this was part of the allow all the other countries, and it was in the accept mode. However, the log above it is in a drop mode, and you can see that it was dropped based on an access list. So you can see the order in which this goes through. First, it hits the geo policy. It was accepted. Then it goes through the access list to determine if this is allowed. And you can see that it was stopped. It was based on my access rule, which is stealth rule. If you look, it was that IP address was trying to connect to my gateway from the outside, and I'm dropping it. So the pros and cons of geo policy. I typically reference this as being like a light switch. It's either on or off. The nice thing about it is if you're using this, you can block off a lot of countries prior to it hitting the access policy. So there's little or no performance impact via the inspection. The disadvantages I kind of pointed out, the exception policy requires known entities, which you may not know, or in this case, some of these country codes get changed. The IP address that are assigned to those country codes change, and you would have to manually modify that. It is also a separate policy outside of your access policy. Most administrators kind of concentrate in the access policy. You do have to remember to click over on the shared policies and click on this. So kind of a disadvantage there that it's not all within one, but that's where the next tool comes into play. Updatable objects. So updatable objects, if you're not familiar with, is more than just geolocation. It does support other external services such as like Office 365, AWS, any of the public cloud offerings, but it also includes geolocations, which is what we're going to be talking about today within the updatable objects. This listing was supported in R80.20, so the version, if you're running on R80.20 or above, you'll have access to updatable objects. If you have not looked at updatable objects, I highly recommend looking at them today and seeing how you can use not only just the geolocations, but all the other external services within it. Again, updatable objects derive their contents from published lists from the providers. Checkpoint uploads this to the cloud. You get this through the threat cloud, all the updates. The benefit of this is that if you have the updatable objects within your policy, when there's changes done in the backend with IP addresses and everything like that, you do not have to push policy for them to take effect. They're done automatically. So let's concentrate on the geolocations, because that's what the topic is about geo blocking. These are the database is similar. It's the same database that you see in GeoPolicy is now in the geolocations under updatable objects. It's still the same MaxMind database, which is the leading provider of IP intelligence, which maps the IP addresses to the country codes. These updates are done on a weekly basis. Here's a sample of the updatable objects in a access policy. You can see the top one, we're using a country code of Israel as a destination. The second rule, you can see that we're using a continent. So again, not only country codes, but also the continents in which they're in. And you're going to see when I show you with the updatable objects, there's the 7 continents that are in there. You can select a continent for a much wider range of access or denials instead of having to do each individual country code. As you saw in the GeoPolicy, you don't have that option. You can also see that we use country codes within a source as well. And then because it's in an access policy, you have all the flexibility. We can select on services. If it's HTTP, HTTPS, you could do it a drop, but maybe for SSH it's allowed. We can also do leverage applications like Facebook. We also have the ability to leverage time. Now, because this is all part of the access policy, you can do inline layers, and I'm going to show you that later on. So you can create your access policies using GeoProtection in an inline layer. So how do I leverage the updatable objects? You saw them in the rules. The way that you do it, you have your rules that you created. You come over, you click on this plus sign, you hit the import. Because they're a database, you must import it into your management with all the updatable object codes. It's going to do a drop down. You select updatable objects, and now you get all the updatable objects. And as you can see, Amazon is some of the services, Azure services, but we're going to concentrate on the geolocations, and you can see there's the 7 continents that are in there. We're going to select North America on one of them. Again, if I checkbox the North America, that would be the entire continent. That's what will be displayed in my access policy. But here I'm going to click on North America. It's going to give me a list of all the different country codes that are represented within North America. Now I can select individual countries within that. I'm going to click on Bermuda here. And that's how it represents within the access policy. Very simple. And you have a lot of flexibility within the access policy here. Because it is in the access policy, these are objects, and I can leverage them into groups. So instead of creating a whole laundry list that you can see right here of different countries and making your rules very large, you can leverage groups as well. So I can come in here as well, click on the plus sign, import the updatable objects, and then I can select the different countries within that. Very simple. So just to show you that there's other means of using these country codes in your access policy. So these are just logs. If you can see that it's being blocked by an access based on the country. So I'm going to click on the bottom one here, which is Russia, and you can see that it was blocked because its IP address range was part of the Russia country code. Okay. So benefits and disadvantages of the updatable objects. As you can see, we have definitely more granular control when using the updatable objects. We can use services. We can narrow the permissions based on countries and then services. In the one thing we talked about, the remote access, here I can open up just the services for all for the the VPN ports to all countries, or I can select certain countries for that VPN access. The disadvantages, I didn't really find too many disadvantages of using the updatable objects, other than you probably find yourself creating a lot more access rules. So that's kind of a disadvantage. Whereas in the geo policy, it was kind of that light switch on and off. It's in a different policy. I just feel like once you start playing with this, you probably will build more rules, probably more administration to maintain those access rules in there. So now both of these tools are based on IP addresses that are assigned to a country code. The one thing that it doesn't do is what happens if I have a website that my end users are trying to go to that has a country code within the URL, and I'm trying to block them from going there. But in this day and age, a lot of these websites are leveraging public hosting facilities all around the globe, which then the IP address ranges are also all around the world as well. So how do I prevent that? So the first two tools that we talked about were, specific traffic going to a country that has been designated with those IP addresses. But how do I stop a URL? And that's what we're going to use the application site or the custom application site. So what does this do for you? It works with the URL filtering blade. It is outbound rule set only. And the way that we do it is we have to put a regular expression in. We have to create a string that will identify a URL with that country code in it. And what we use is a regex tool to customize that URL string so that it will match for that country code. And it's all done within the access policy. So here is a sample of where you see that. So on the top here, and this is what I wanted to show also in the access policy, we can do inline layer rules. So we had the parent rule up on top. We have a child rule, which has the custom application site information. So here I have it that we're stopping from Russia and Belarus. We also use the country codes as well for this rule set. So this is where you can get creative within your access policy. You can leverage the different technologies within it for all the type of geo blocking for your environment. So let's click on 3.1 and just enlarge. We're going to click on Russia. And then you can see that I have created a custom application site. I named it Russia. I created a primary category. Now, these categories, if you're familiar with the URL filtering security blade, we use categories. And that could be, shopping or gambling, weapons type of thing, where you can block sites based on category. What you're doing here is you're creating a category based upon the country code. So you can create your own custom category here, or you can use the default, which is the default or custom application site for the category. But this is where you create that specific script. And that specific script is going to read the URL, and it's going to look for the specific country code within it. And it will block it or allow, depending on your rule. All right, now because these are regular expressions, you must turn that on. By default, this box is unchecked. If you do not have this check, it will not block. So just to point that out. So what does that string actually mean? So basically that's the string that will actually block any URL that has a .ru at the end. All right. So what does the first /w represent? It matches any word character A through Z, capital letters, numbers, any character in the front before the .ru. The plus basically is it doesn't matter the number of characters before. It could be 3 characters, it could be 100 characters, it could be 1,000 characters. It will match as all the way up until it gets to the dot. So the /dot matches the character. So this is what I am really looking for. So I put it in, and it is case sensitive, hence the reason why we have a lowercase and uppercase, just in case if someone uses a capital RU. In here, we want to catch both. So the RU is matching what I am looking for within the string. In this case, for Russia, that is their country code. And the bracket /W is matching a single character not present. So this is basically no characters. That's what it literally means. No characters after it. So if you read this, it's any characters above, before the .ru, the piece that I'm actually concentrating on, and no characters past it. So why do we put that bracket /W on the end? Is because RU could represent a site like Rutgers. So if I only had the /W plus, that's all the characters up to the .ru. So it could have been like hr.rutgers.com. That would fall into that .ru. And if I didn't have that /W on there, that would also be blocked. But because I put that /W on there, that means no characters past that. Rutgers would have, other characters past it, so that would not match. So that's how you can create these custom strings to actually match specifically to the country codes. So here I'm going to show you how to create that custom application site. You click on the star over on the right-hand side here for the objects, hit custom application site, and here we're going to name it Germany. Again, we can create a custom category, or we can use the custom application site. But here we're going to put in our script. And based on the information I sent to you, we're just going to use the country code here, change it with DE for Germany. We hit OK. That's added now to the policy. Now, if I click on sites that are going to Germany, you'll see that I get the page block. Why? Because in the URL filtering, I do have a page block on here. They get told that it's being blocked because it's part of it's Germany, and it's part of the custom application site. If I click on this, you can notice something else. The destination is not a German IP address. The flag is a US. It's also AWS. On here, if I click on it, it tells me that this top site was going to www.odo.de, but it really was going to an IP address assigned to the US. If I click on the second one, you'll notice, again, this is a block. It's based on Rule 3.1, which is whether it's Russia, Belarus, or Germany. It is blocked. I got a blocked message. You can see I went to conrad.de, but the destination again is United States. And if you take this IP address that it was going to, I'm trying to remember where that was. It was actually 104.90.67.49. I believe if you go up in here, 104.90.67.49. If I go into MaxMind, it actually does tell me that it's part of the US country code, and it's part of Akamai. Well, that makes sense. This is one of those global hosting areas, and this is one of the IP addresses that are assigned to that URL. So that's where the geo protection piece, where geo policy and the updatable objects are only defined by IP address, this slipped through. This could have slipped through if I used the custom applications and blocking by the country code. Now I'm blocking all activity going to those locations. So I always recommend using a layered approach, kind of making it like a funnel, all locations internet. I tried to leverage geo policy as much as I can. This is that on and off switch type of policy. I block off the ones that I know for a fact I'm never going to do business with. I'm just going to block it just to get rid of all the back end noise potentially coming from those countries. Then I used updatable objects to get that granular, flexible access policies using the country codes in there. But remember, updatable objects are not just for country codes, they're for a lot of different services that randomly change their IP addresses. So again, that's why I highly recommend you guys taking a look if you have not looked at it. And lastly, the application site. That's where you create those custom application sites and using the script to lock in on the specific country code. Again, I'm not going to go through a demo because a lot of the demo is just a repeat what I went through with the presentation. If you do have some questions or want to see a demo, reach out to me directly and I'll be happy to do that for you. But I did want to go into the troubleshooting and technical information. This is all that information that I use for the presentation. This URL is for the MaxMind. This is where you can actually identify those IP addresses and find out what country code that it's assigned to. So you just pop in the IP address and it will give you the country code. If the geo policy, this is that first tool that I talked about, is not on your navigation pane, it's probably because you're up on R81 and you have not used it in the previously. It may be disabled by default. You can re-enable it by using this SK article. It's basically just running this command in expert mode, and it will make it visible again on your policy. The tool that I use for regular expression to create those custom URL scripts is the regex101.com. Again, just point out, the nice thing is it has a quick reference down here. It gives you all the information that you need to build out those scripts. Again, this is not just for geo protection. You can use these scripts for any type of regular expression for URLs that you may want to block. The nice piece up on here is what you type up in here is your string. And then you could type URLs and you could do a testing directly on that expression. So you can see whether or not your expression, your script is going to work the way that you want it to work. Very good tool. If you want to identify the country code with its 2-digit country code information, I did find out that like Belarus is not like BE, it's BY. I would have never known that. But if you go out to this site, it does give you the country code flags, and it also gives you the 2-digit country code for your scripting. If by chance, if you look in your logs and you notice that the IP address is of a certain country and it's being blocked, but the flag doesn't match, just be reassured that the IP address is from a database that is maintained. That block is probably because it is part of your site. The flag itself is a cosmetic component and is part of a different file. So sometimes those files don't get updated when possibly an IP address range gets updated. So you can do this manually. If you do find yourself that in your logs that the flag is not matching properly, you can download a new flag file, and it's like 7 or 8 steps. Just follow this SK article and you can update your flag so it does represent the right flag. Again, if you have any questions or like to have a demo of this, feel feel free to reach out to me. This is my IP address, my email address. If you want to reach out and send me any type of questions. I know that we're probably over our time limit right now.
Yeah, just a little bit. No problem. It's recorded. So got a couple of questions here I'll fire out to you.
Okay.
Kind of covered this, I guess. How are the geo IP address lists updated and how frequent?
And that's weekly. So the updatable objects, those are done weekly. Again, when the MaxMine company updates them, they forward it out. So as soon as they make those changes, we get those changes and then we pass them out through the threat cloud out to the gateways.
And a policy push is not required to.
That is correct.
Right.
As long as you have those country codes within your policy.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it's just the updates on there. So.
Geo protection, is it supported on the SMB appliances, the embedded Gaia?
That I have to check. I don't believe so. I think this is.
I was looking it up when I got it, but I think it's available since 8820.10.
Oh, okay.
With updatable objects, but we'll verify that.
Yeah, updatable objects, but not the geo policy.
No, I think geo policy also.
Oh, also? Okay.
8820.10. I can, yeah. IPS blade is required for geo policy?
Yes, that is documented that you do need. You don't need to have it. You need a license for IPS because it's part of the threat blade component. You do need to have a IPS license activated on your gateway for it to work.
Okay. On the exceptions, I guess a question more about what you can do as exceptions, IP addresses and or services. I guess the questions around if you have somebody in a country, you want to block the country, but you want to allow one IP in that country, like you have one employee, is that possible with the exception?
Yeah, you can create that exception rule above if you're only doing the updatable objects in the exceptions, you can create a rule above the country block and have just that IP address. So if you have an outbound, like a specific host internal that wants to go to a specific country that you have blocked for all the rest of the company going to, you can create that rule above it. Just like any other access policy, you want a more qualified rule above a more general rule. So just treat the country codes as a more general rule, and any specific access that you want would be above that rule. So it hits that rule first.
Okay. Trying to trip you up here on your regex. You have the uppercase RU and lowercase RU. Is it possible to do one upper, one lower in a URL? And would you have to put those in your exceptions also?
Yes.
Okay.
Because in that, it has that it was case sensitive.
Right.
So if I don't know how many people would do that, but yes, if you want to fully cover that, you would do an upper and a lowercase.
Right. Okay.
Now, the best thing is that you would only have to do 4 options there because there's only a 2-digit country.
Right. Yeah.
But we covered the 2 majors because some people may have the caps lock on, and when they're typing out the URL, which would have the caps lock for the RU as part of it, and then or lowercase, which 99% of the people just type in lowercase.
Of course. Yep. There's a way around it. Users will try and find it. Right.
Yeah.
I think that pretty much covers it. We had a couple more that were anonymous that please send me an email if I didn't get to your question because they were more involved, and I'll make sure, Brian and I can help you, or talk to your SE. But please shoot it to me if we didn't answer your question. Thank you, Brian. Great information. I know we went a little bit over, like as always, these are recorded. So we'll send the follow-up email with all these links that Brian referenced, and also have the URL to the recording. Our next webinar will be in 2 weeks. You'll see the invitation for that soon. So with that, we'll let you have your day back. So thank you, Brian. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we'll see you here next time.
Have a great day, guys.